Okay. Good morning. My name is Justice Betty, and I'm the co-chair of the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee. The committee secretary has confirmed that we have quorum, so I will call meeting 6 of the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee to order. Welcome, everyone. The meeting is being held using the city's WebEx technology with members and staff connecting by video conference or calling in. Because we are meeting remotely, we ask for your patience with any delays and technical issues. Members of the public can also watch the meeting streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. We have no registered public speakers today. I would like to remind all staff and invited participants to keep your mics muted and your video turned off unless you need to address the committee. This will make it easier for me as chair and for those watching on YouTube to see the members as we debate and vote on the agenda items. Members, please keep your mics muted unless you wish to question staff or speak to an item. If members wish to ask questions of staff or to speak, please make sure your video is on and raise your hand, or unmute your mic and indicate your intention to speak, and I will create a speakers list. When voting on an item or a motion, I would ask members to turn on your video and raise your hand to indicate your vote. If there is a recorded vote, I will ask you to state if you are in favor or opposed. Members, I want to remind you that although we are participating remotely, we must still submit our motions in writing. The clerk's staff are available at cabrac@toronto.ca to help with motions. And although we are in different locations and meeting remotely today, the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee acknowledges the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? If you'd like to declare an interest, please indicate the item number and the nature of the interest. When declaring an interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, members are also required to file a written declaration with the clerk. The clerk's staff can provide you with forms which you should complete and submit before the end of the meeting each time you declare an interest. If you have an interest, please raise your hand or unmute your mic to let me know. Okay. May I have a motion to confirm the minutes from the committee's meeting on February 16th, 2022? If anyone would like to go ahead to raise their hand with that motion to confirm the minutes from February 16th, 2022? Great, I have a motion from Epetha. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? That's carried. Okay, we will now proceed to consider the 3 items on the agenda. The first item is item CR 6.1, City of Toronto's Action on Housing. We'll be hearing from Valessa Faria, the Director of Housing Policy and Strategy, and Doug Rollins, the Director of Housing Stability Services, on a presentation to our committee today. All right, I will turn it over to our presenters. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. I'm Valessa Faria, Director of Housing Policy and Strategy in the Housing Secretariat, and I'm joined today by my colleague Doug Rollins, who will introduce himself, and our colleague Shanelli Chakraborty, who's on the line, will also be joining us to tell you a bit about the city's 10-year housing action plan and our achievements to date on this plan. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, today we'll give you an overview of the city's Housing TO 2020-2030 action plan. We will also provide you with an update on the progress made since approval of the plan in 2020 and key actions that are planned to be undertaken by the city in 2022 and 2023. Next slide, please. So the Housing TO plan it's Canada's first human rights-based plan, and it was adopted by City Council in December 2019. So this is really a robust plan, and it provides a blueprint for actions and investments across the full housing continuum over the next 10 years. And as you'll see on this image, the housing continuum ranges all the way from emergency shelters to supportive and transitional housing, long-term care, supportive housing, all the way to affordable homeownership and market rental housing and market ownership. Next slide, please. So our Housing TO plan, as mentioned before, is Canada's first human rights-based plan. In adopting this plan in late 2019, City Council also updated the city's, the Toronto Housing Charter. And the charter states that it is the policy of the City of Toronto to recognize that housing is essential to the inherent dignity and well-being of a person and to building sustainable and inclusive communities. So if you go to the next slide, please. I will talk a bit about what we're doing to advance housing as a human right and to implement this plan. So as mentioned before, this is really a robust plan with actions across the full housing spectrum. The plan has 13 key strategies, which are shown to the right of the slide. And there are also 76 actions that fall under these 13 strategies. The plan itself is anticipated to help over 340,000 households to access and maintain good quality, safe, adequate, affordable housing over the next 10 years. And I'll just go through some of the major targets for you today. So some of the major targets in the plan include approving 40,000 new affordable rental homes, of which about 18,000 are intended to be supportive housing, which is essentially a deeply affordable home with access to support services. The plan is also focused on enhancing eviction prevention measures so that we can ensure residents continue to maintain their homes. And the plan is also very focused on improving housing affordability to ensure stability for existing households. Next slide, please. So this really big plan, it's going to be very costly to deliver. So we've costed it at about $27.7 billion. This plan requires significant investments from all levels of government, and the slide shows the anticipated or the required investment from each order of government plus investments made to date. So you'll see the City of Toronto, we're really leading the way right now. We have, through our budget process and our various initiatives and programs, we have committed over $7 billion into housing to improve housing affordability for residents. The federal government, through programs like the Rapid Housing Initiative, has contributed over $2 billion, and there's also been some investments from the provincial governments. Next slide, please. So at the onset of COVID, so we had this really great plan that was approved at the end of 2019. Then in early 2020, COVID occurred. So what we did is staff took a report to City Council to say that you just approved this robust plan, but we need to expedite investments to help residents who are impacted by COVID, and particularly people within our shelter system and those experiencing homelessness. So this 24-month plan was essentially a plan to expedite delivery of the Housing TO plan in 2022 and 2023. So the plan itself had a target of creating 3,000 permanent housing opportunities, of which 2,000 are intended to be supportive housing opportunities. And again, really focused on delivering new housing for people experiencing homelessness as an urgent response to COVID. So you'll see to the right, the 3,000 new opportunities are made up of new permanent homes, including modular homes, acquisitions, and housing benefits. So I'm happy to say we are on target with this plan, and by the end of 2022, we anticipate that we'll be delivering over 3,080 new housing opportunities. So I will pass this on to my colleague now, Shanali, who will speak with you about some of the progress that we've made, including our efforts to advance housing as a human right. So Shanali, over to you.
Thank you, Velessa. Hi, everyone. I'm Shanali Chakraborty from the City Manager's Office, and I've spoken to this group some time ago at your first meeting. So I'm just going to speak to one particular aspect within this broader context that Velessa and Doug are speaking to you about. So for the next slide. So one of the directions from City Council when they adopted the renewed housing charter and the housing action plan was to ask the city manager to look at what a role or function for a housing commissioner could be to support this human rights based plan and the values enshrined in the charter. They specifically asked us, the city manager, to look at how that role could independently provide an assessment to council on our progress, as well as how we can take concrete actions to combat systemic housing discrimination and address systemic hurdles in the housing system. So for some context here, we haven't, this is not the first time that Toronto has been a first in Canada to undertake research and look at establishing something. So we have one of the most robust accountability frameworks, certainly in Ontario and likely in Canada at a municipal level, and we're the only city in Ontario that has its own ombudsman. And the ombudsman's role is to look at systemic issues and do investigations and receive complaints from the public around issues, not just for housing, but the broad spectrum of municipal activity. So part of our work to look at how to establish a potentially new role for municipalities at all is to consider it within the accountability framework that we have. And worth noting is that the federal government has recently established a federal housing advocate, and it's only been in office for a month or two. So this is really at the forefront of work in terms of housing human rights. Next slide. So just some context of how we've gone about doing this research. We retained external experts to undertake a review, and part of the considerations of that review is how the role, would it have a role to undertake systemic reviews? How would it impact policy and monitoring of our progress? What's the role? How would the role work on advocacy, public education, consultation, connection with residents, particularly those with lived experience, and how the independence and reporting features this role would be. So they have done a review and undertaken consultations and are getting close to their final report. So you may anticipate seeing a report from the city manager to city council before the end of this council term. So I will now pass it over to Doug for the next piece.
Good morning, all. My name's Doug Rollins. I'm the Director of Housing Stability Services, and echoing my thanks to the committee for having us here today. So I'm going to briefly speak to the committee about our key progress towards meeting our Housing TO 10-year targets. We'll briefly summarize these in areas of new housing development, helping renters, protecting and preserving existing housing, and supporting renters buy their first home. So in the first area of new housing development, pleased to report that the city's completed an extensive modernization of 389 Church Street that created 120 self-contained permanent homes for women and women-led families. We opened up our first 2 modular supportive housing buildings within 9 months of approval from council, which is lightning quick, and dedicated those units to people experiencing homelessness with the necessary wraparound supports to keep them housed. Our efforts to pursue additional modular housing continue. We've made significant progress on delivering the 24-month COVID housing and homelessness response plan. As Velessa identified earlier, the COVID came on the heels of our 10-year plan, and we quickly moved in concert with our colleagues with Shelter Support and Housing to develop a plan and execute it quickly to mitigate some of the impacts of COVID. And that work continues as we continue to deal with the most recent wave and obviously the recovery that will follow. We made great progress on advancing the Housing Now initiatives that committed $1.3 billion in land, financial incentives, and staffing resources, making it possible for the city to achieve 50% of its 10-year 10,000 affordable housing targets in less than 3 years. And we entered into a partnership with the United Church Property Resource Corporation to unlock value of their real estate assets and help create a future 500 affordable homes from communities of faith of all denominations over the next 5 to 7 years. Next slide, please. In terms of helping renters, the City of Toronto distributed the first 1,400 Canada Ontario housing benefits to 1,400 households. These benefits are funded by the provincial and federal government and enable the city and its to provide benefits to secure affordable housing and allow the recipients of those benefits the portability of moving them with them, whether it's in Toronto or outside Toronto. We assisted over 3,000 households through the Eviction Prevention in the Community program and rent bank programs in 2020 and 2021. So stabilizing people in their homes and preventing them from entering homelessness. We supported renters by establishing a permanent tenant advisory committee on the protection of affordable rental housing. That subcommittee reports into the Planning and Housing Committee and provides input on all matters related to tenant programs and services. We launched a new renters hub on the city website and created the first eviction prevention handbook. Both tools will build upon in the future, but create pathways and information resources to help people find information that meets their unique needs. And we advanced on the new housing affordability definition, linking it to low and moderate income households, which will help and attract key workers in our cities. Next slide, please. We established a new MURA program, which is the multi-unit residential acquisition program that's aimed at protecting existing supply of rental housing by removing market rental buildings from speculative markets and securing them for permanent affordable housing. The city provided $3 million to Kensington Community Land Trust, a community-based nonprofit, to support the acquisition and renovation of operations of 12 affordable housing units. Made $13 million available through a combination of financing and grants for the retrofitting of older apartment buildings through the new Taking Action of Tower Renewal program. We supported the transfer of over 600 single-family houses from TCHC to the nonprofit sector. Much of that work is underway, and this will ensure that those individual houses remain in a state of good repair and affordable on a permanent basis. And we secured 704 affordable rental housing programs through the Community Housing Partnership Renewal Program that takes a partnership with existing social housing providers funded federally and creates a pathway for a renewed relationship with them moving forward. And finally, next slide, please. Supporting renters to buy their homes. We've assisted over almost 36,000 first-time home buyers by providing land trust tax rebates. A review of the city's affordable homeownership policy framework is underway, including an equity and impact assessment. We'll continue to seek federal and provincial investments to deliver new affordable homeownership opportunities, particularly for racialized, equity-deserving communities such as Indigenous peoples and Black people, as a way to address long-standing inequities. And I'll turn it back over to my colleague Valessa, who will close with a summary of our key priorities for 2022 and 2023. Valessa?
Thank you, Doug. Next slide, please. So in 2022 and 2023, we will continue to focus on scaling up the supply of housing, including affordable homes. So we'll continue to advance the Housing Now initiative, which Doug mentioned, really activates city-owned land to create affordable housing. By 2030, our target is to approve 10,000 new affordable homes on city land. We will also implement a vacant home tax to increase the availability and bring more supply on the housing market. And we will implement inclusionary zoning within minister-approved protected major transit station areas. Next slide, please. We will also focus on increasing housing opportunities, equity, and supporting the environment. We will prioritize actions across the housing spectrum to increase housing opportunities for equity-deserving groups, including Black residents. We will continue to work on establishing the Housing Commissioner role or function, and we will try to support climate resilience through all of these efforts as we look to increase housing supply and improve our existing supply of homes. Next slide, please. We'll also continue to focus on delivery of the 24-month COVID Housing and Homelessness Action Plan. And at the same time, we will look at establishing a new 24-month plan to really support our ongoing recovery from COVID. Next slide, please. A key focus for the city and our partners will also be our efforts to continue to help more renters. We will centralize resources to improve coordination and maximize outcomes for renters. We will continue to advance our efforts to prevent the loss of existing housing supply, and we will continue to focus on helping to promote tenant rights and tenant education. Next slide, please. We also acknowledge that a large part of ensuring that our efforts are successful is by having data that's reliable and making data-informed policies and evidence-based actions. So a key priority for us will be to advance a housing data strategy across the city, with initial work already beginning. We will look at things like eviction data and trends. We will try to improve our public reporting on the delivery of affordable and supportive housing development. We will establish a Toronto-specific data book, which will provide a high-level assessment of the health of the Toronto housing system based on key indicators. And our housing data strategy, it's a multi-year, multifaceted strategy that will continue, that we will continue to build upon over the next number of years, with data available to the city as well as data available through other organizations that we work closely with. And that brings us to end of our presentation. We thank you so much for your time today, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that informative presentation. Members, I will open it up to the floor. If there are any questions, would you mind just raising your hand? Yep. Member Phillips?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for that really informative presentation and for the very comprehensive plan. There are lots of really excellent elements. And I really like the data-driven strategy. My one question at this moment, I might have others later, but are you collecting race-based data? Because without the collection of race-based data, it will still be impossible to tell whether or not and how this plan is impacting or specifically assisting access to housing for Black community members and racialized or marginalized communities. If we don't have the data that's disaggregated so that we can look at it, if we didn't have it in the past, then it will be impossible to go back, obviously, but if we don't start collecting it now, we will not know how we are improving access for Black community members. Is that something that's being considered?
Thank you very much for the question, and Bless, if it's okay, I'll start, and maybe you can add if we're done. So to the committee, I think one of the biggest indications the city currently has for housing need is the number of people who are applying for social housing and the number of households who are making application to new affordable housing opportunities. So the city is in the midst of transformation on both fronts. So earlier this year, we launched My Housing TO, which is an online portal for individuals and families seeking rent-geared to income housing. And for the first time ever, we are collecting on a voluntary basis race-based and equity data from applicants. So we are in the process currently right now of updating the application and information for the 80,000 households currently on the waiting list. And following that exercise later this year, we'll have our first cut of information for people seeking housing opportunities. On a similar vein, Valessa, I, and Abby Bond will be coming back to Committee and Council in June with a plan for Council's consideration on a centralized access portal for affordable rental housing opportunities that will build on the same database and the same principles from which the choice-based and RGI database was designed. Again, one of those key pieces is to identify the more qualities and understanding of the people seeking housing. Now, on the back end, we will work in future years to determine a better understanding of who is actually accessing that housing. So we have comparables of people seeking the opportunity and people who have obtained the opportunity. So to summarize, we are beginning that journey. We're on early days. We'll have raw data to support, but over time, that raw data will provide the opportunity to create comparisons about people seeking a housing opportunity and people receiving it. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you. That does answer my initial question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Rollins, for the response. Member Phillips, thank you for the question. Member Hashi, I'd also seen your hand as well.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Thank you so much for your presentation. I think taking the lens of housing as a human right is very important. My question is two parts. So the first is around wait lists. I know there's a lot of interest in supportive and affordable housing, so I'm curious if the city has any plans around those who are on the wait list and underhoused, especially for supportive housing that can sometimes take upwards of 10 years for individuals who are experiencing major mental illness or addictions. And the second part is if the city has any discussion or planning around unregulated group homes or rooming houses where people sometimes end up due to inadequate income. And we know that these places can be very expensive, overpopulated, and unsafe for a variety of reasons. Thank you.
So maybe I'll start and ask again Valessa to append. So on the waiting list again, we already have a process for people seeking rent geared to income housing, and that is a legislated process that we are evolving with my acting TO. We're moving forward on the affordable to create a one window access similarly for people to be able to access housing, and we have some interesting work going on in the shelter system as well to promote housing opportunities for people who are homeless. And that's called coordinated access, where we assess the individual needs of people within the shelter system and match them to supports for new housing opportunities. This is the process that occurred for the two modular sites, as well as some of the units identified at 389 Church Street. So the purpose there is to make sure people who are exiting homelessness have the right level and degree of supports necessary for them to not only obtain housing, but to sustain it over the long term. Valessa, do you have any more to add on maybe our 24-month supportive housing action plan and some of the other work we have going on?
Thanks, Doug. I think you've summarized it quite well. The only thing I would add is that over the next year, one of the key priority for us is to work with the Black community and to establish a set aside of units within or as part of our 40,000 approval target, specifically dedicated to Black residents. And that would be in consultation, of course, with the community, with Black serving organizations and housing providers. So I did want to mention that because I think it would be of interest to this group.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the response. And Member Hashi, again, thank you for the question. Final question from Member Kortine.
Member Justice. Yes, thank you so much for this really insightful presentation. I wasn't really aware of all the city's efforts that were going into making housing more affordable and housing more. So thank you all very much for your dedication and hard work to bringing all these plans to life. I did want to speak to Um, what about like middle class young professionals that feel that they are that in their lifetime that they won't be able to afford a house simply because of uh, the high cost of housing? I was just wondering if what are there any specific initiatives or programs, or if there's any communication that is being done to ensure that uh, the housing at least doesn't increase more than it already is, so that we have some type of hope in our lifetime that we will be able to afford housing. Yeah, I wanted to see what was being done specifically for young professionals that do have some type of income, but due to the nature of the high housing costs, don't feel like they're able to afford housing that is reasonable and affordable.
Thank you for the question, through the chair. As mentioned, our housing plan is it's a robust plan. So taking a human rights-based approach, we focus first and foremost on supporting people experiencing homelessness and those with low incomes. However, we understand that to create flow in the housing system, we need to also create opportunities to help people move into affordable rental housing, market rental housing, and hopefully affordable or market market ownership homes. So the city does provide, as Doug mentioned in his slide, the city does provide land transfer tax rebates for first-time home buyers. So that's one initiative that we are supporting through the plan. We do also have, it's called the HOPE program. It's essentially a home ownership. It's an affordable home ownership program where we support moderate income residents to achieve home ownership. So as part of our 10-year housing plan, the city has a target of 400 affordable home ownership opportunities per year. And we work with organizations like Options for Homes, Habitat for Humanity, and others to support residents into home ownership. So those are some of the main initiatives that we have underway. We also continue to work closely with the federal and provincial governments and to augment any sort of programs that they may have with our incentives at the city to make these ownerships more attainable for residents. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much again, Ms. Faria and Mr. Rollins, for your presentation. And members, thank you for your thoughtful questions. Are there any speakers to the item? If you wish to speak, please raise your hand or unmute your mic to let me know.
Madam Chair, Deputy Mayor here.
Yes, perfect. Please go ahead.
I actually have a couple of questions for staff. Didn't realize we were closing the questions off, but can staff explain the relationship that is taking place with respect to Black North and the housing projects that they have on the go, how the city is working with Black North along with the federal and provincial government, please?
Thank you for the question, Deputy Mayor Thompson. Our office in the Housing Secretary, we have been meeting with Black North. We are actually in the process of working with Habitat Humanity and Black North on bringing forward some home ownership opportunities. We hope to report to council over the next month or so on some opportunities that will be supported through the city as well as Habitat for Humanity under their own programs, as well as some recent programs that were identified by the federal government to support Black residents into home ownership. So it's very much a priority for us and very much on our radar, something that we would look to support and advance this year.
Can you be more specific with respect to the programs that the city is working with Black North on? I know you've indicated that there are things that are taking place. Is there one specific project that you may wish to speak about that is perhaps more eminent in terms of the relationship with Black North and the city and also the federal program, the $10 million that has been allocated to Black North? Are you able to speak to that at this moment?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Unfortunately not, because the project has not, we have not formalized at the staff level our negotiation, and we do not have a report in front of council yet. Unfortunately,
But
I'm
you
not
can
able to
say,
speak to it.
you can say that that's ongoing because that's very progressive, right? In
Yes,
terms of where we
absolutely.
are now. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that to the members that there are real concrete initiatives that are actually taking place. So it's not just words, they're actually deed and real action that's actually being taken. I just wanted to sort of bring that forward. My next question for you, and thank you very much for that. My next question for you, could you provide a copy of the deck that you just presented so that members will have that for their review? And then also a couple more. Did I hear you say that the home ownership aspect with respect to what the city's working with, and you mentioned Habitat for Humanity, was it 400 per year over the next 10 years? Was that what you said?
Yeah, that's correct. 400 per year.
Right, and I know that Doug had mentioned about the race-based data application process that's being taken. So if we looked at those numbers, for example, the 400, so potentially if Blacks make up 9% of the population in the city of Toronto, so roughly 30 homes would be allocated to the Black community if we use those numbers. And then on the 341,000 units that you're talking about over that period, and you talk a little bit, that was early part of the presentation, and so 9% of the population, that allocation, and I'm just sort of stating based on the percentage of Blacks in the city of Toronto, which is about 9%. So it'd be about 30,000 units of housing would apply, for example, to the Black community, if in fact we were to utilize sort of an equity lens and focusing it on specific groups. Would that be the case?
I think the total population is one way to do it, but I think it's a bit more nuanced than that. I think many of our programs are income based, so we have to take that into account as well. And I think one of the most important parts, Deputy Mayor, for us is to be able to identify what the current processes are achieving in terms of equity deserving groups, and then to work backwards to say where is there inherent bias or discrimination or a delta, and then come up with more direct forms to what Valessa was talking about set-asides or referral pathways, so that we can ensure the outcomes and opportunities are meeting the target equity outcomes of the City of Toronto that you and your colleagues at Council established for us.
Yes, thanks very much for that, because that's really helpful. And I think that this body obviously can play a role in terms of helping to formulate as well as to provide some input. So I guess my question is, at what point will you come back to this body in order to provide an update and also to see how they could provide input to assist as part of the, I guess it would be the formulation of the exercise that you're looking to put the lens on and so on? I'm just wondering how you'll use this body, because I think this body could be helpful.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Thompson. I absolutely agree that this body would be helpful. In terms of advancing this work at the staff level, we'll be working very closely with our colleagues in SDFA and the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Office specifically, to help us engage with the Black community, and we would be happy to report back perhaps over the next. I know we'll have a break for the election, but perhaps later in the year, we'd be happy to come back to you with something.
Sure. Thank you very much for that. Madam Chair, those are my questions. Thank you very much to the staff.
Thank you so much. And be mindful of time. I'll take one more statement from Member Phillips.
Thank you, Co-Chair Betty, and thank you, Co-Chair Deputy Mayor. My one question, which is following on our Deputy Mayor's comment, is that if we are taking a population-based approach, given the historical inequities, we must start at the very least with the percentage in the population, but that of course will not rectify historic injustices or in access or lack of access to housing, and therefore to rectify those historical challenges that the Black community has faced in terms of accessing housing, we would need to use an approach that is much more than the percentage of the Black community, the percentage that the Black community makes up of the overall population, in order to rectify historic lack of access. So just wanted to make that comment. I'm sure that you're aware of that, and thank you very much for taking a human rights approach and an equity-based approach to this issue. Thank you.
Okay. Hearing no further speakers, do I have a motion to receive the item? Great, thank you. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, any opposed? This motion carries. Wonderful. Thank you so much again, Ms. Feria and Mr. Rowlands.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thank you. The next item is item CR 6.2, PARTNA program. Cheryl Case, Planning Director, and Jason John, Financial Director, PARTNA, are here to give a presentation to the committee.
Hello, can you folks hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. And Mr. John?
Hi, how you doing?
Wonderful. Over to the two of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let me just. I have presenting abilities. Oh, it's share screen. Yeah. Okay. Okay, amazing. All right, so I'm glad to be here. So thank you for the invitation. So we're presenting here on PARTNA. This is a Black-led solution for empowering the Black community to expand affordable housing supply. It's also a community-based approach to affordable housing development. So first I'll introduce myself, and Jason will introduce himself as well. So my name is Cheryl Case. I'm the planning director of PARTNA. I practice a human rights approach to community planning, and I have been organizing in Little Jamaica itself since 2019. So I'm familiar, I'm sure you guys are familiar with Little Jamaica. So I just listed in my bio just 2 projects that I've been engaged in for Little Jamaica, Black Bridges in Eglinton, which I did in partnership with Black Urbanism Toronto, who's very focused on protecting commercial businesses, Black commercial businesses on Eglinton. And from that project, one of the outcomes that came forward is that culture is really dependent also on affordable housing. So that's when I partnered with the Oakwood Vaughan Community Organization to launch the Tenant Solidarity Program, which this is a program where we're organizing with homeowners and residents and tenants. For example, doing tenant organizing, doing affordable housing development workshops, perhaps even starting a little land trust in the neighborhood. So that's myself. And really glad to have Jason on the side, because I do a lot of the planning policy stuff, but Jason is really where we bring home the financial knowledge. If you can introduce yourself, please, Jason.
Hi, I'm Jason John, and I'm the finance director of PARTNA. I'm a mortgage broker that specializes with first home buyers up into developers. As noted, I've done over $500 million in mortgages, and I have 20 years plus banking and mortgage experience. I'm just on the finance side, so make sure all the numbers work, and also to work with homeowners on making sure the numbers work for them. And I'm excited to be part of this and to be presenting with you guys.
Yeah. So the reason why I got into exploring the idea of PARTNA is because as a housing policy developer, I became increasingly concerned when I saw that the missing middle conversation was not actually being championed by those who are really looking to dedicate this housing typology to development of affordable housing. So in developing PARTNA, I was able to collaborate with Jason as well as all those wonderful collaborators listed below. And really the idea is that communities deserve better than this. So we're seeing in Little Jamaica is one example where you're seeing lots of bungalows being torn down and turned into what we call here in Toronto mini mansions. developing into even, let's say, 3 or 4 times the size as it was prior, but housing the same number of people, right? So expensive houses becoming even more luxurious and expensive. So I did a study actually, and between 2001 and 2016, the City of Toronto permitted the demolition and reconstruction of over 9,000 detached homes to be developed into larger and more expensive single-family housing. And this rate is only increasing with time. And so you can imagine if the city is looking to this, and so if you can imagine without a model for how development can actually be dedicated to serve lower income people and moderate income people, the city will only become increasingly more segregated in terms of income and accessible in terms of access for those who don't have family wealth. So this is another map here produced from one of my studies. This shows that the alarming rate of detached houses being, semi-detached houses being torn down or being modified and becoming more expensive. So each red dot here is a building permit to build a new house. So that oftentimes includes having knocked it down and then rebuilding it. The orange is where there's a story addition. And then yellow is where there's another type of an addition. So for example, that might be expanding the rear yard or deepening the basement. And so between 2016 and 2021, the City of Toronto issued building permits equaling up to about $4 million worth of construction costs. So you can imagine if that $4 million was put towards affordable housing in this neighborhood, what the difference would be. So, this is a very values-driven organization. As I mentioned, I'm a policy planner, and the lack of policy is really the reason why PARTNA came to be. Because we very strongly believe that policies to increase housing density in single-family dominated neighborhoods must integrate provisions to generate affordable housing that reflects the interests of marginalized groups who have been systemically excluded from the economy of building, owning, renting housing in these neighborhoods. Failure to integrate such affordable housing provisions risks renewing the legacy of systemic discrimination. And so marginalized groups, of course, include Black people. I definitely have heard too many stories of Black people, for example, who've wanted to buy housing in detached housing neighborhoods, but have had the seller selectively decide not to sell because they did not want to sell to a Black person. So if you can imagine that was happening back then with the new interest in detached housing neighborhoods for adding new density, this issue may only increase. Jason?
Yes. So Partna is a name derived from the Jamaican culture, like partner banking in the form of community banks serving marginalized community members through community collaboration, residential pools, redistribution of funds to improve the economic well-being of all members. And like the Jamaican tradition, development of social purpose of affordable housing is designed to support or marginalized community members and works with pool to redistribute funds to improve economic well-being in all members. So we're excited to kind of work with homeowners as a solution that will partner with them in order to assist in the challenges that we have in the housing sector. Next slide. So what we do is we want to focus on a strategy that consists of like making assemblies of scales of development to laneway homes and to also smaller scale development projects, also basement additions, any way that we could assist homeowners in providing additional housing. Next slide. So the missing middle is important, and it's very important to me because for someone who has been working in the industry for 20 years, I really only heard about it first when Cheryl brought it up to me when I was looking at a project for myself. So it's something that someone that has seen housing prices rise significantly and seen customers have great success, but also people having issues and struggling and getting into the market. It's something that is a problem that I want to assist in addressing because I feel like it's very important, and there's a lot of gaps in just I feel like the knowledge base in the public sector understanding what the missing middle is and what solutions can be available and how like everyone can kind of participate in this. So next slide.
And I just want to add on as well. So the city of Toronto, so like that knowledge gap is like really important to note, right? Because Jason like works with people who own detached houses, and like that's been his bread and butter for many years. And so like the knowledge around missing middle development hasn't really been exposed to members of our community, right? So the city of Toronto actually is leading a multi-year study on the missing middle, how do you expand housing options in the missing middle? And they actually did make reference to the fact that detached housing neighborhoods have systemically marginalized immigrant communities, racialized communities, right? So how can the city actually take those words into action and start to develop a policy framework that actually allows, in particular, Black residents and Black affordable housing developers to be a substantial part of rectifying the harms done by this long time history of systemic exclusion via this single family housing neighborhood planning program.
Yeah, so the idea is to build affordable housing up to the missing middle scale in partnerships with single and semi-detached homeowners, like centrally managed with the affordable housing units through the organization of PARTNA in the Toronto area and Solidarity Housing in the Vancouver area. Partner with homeowners to build affordable housing on their property. So what we would do is we would provide financing, planning, and other support to facilitate the redevelopment. We would come with a shared equity approach of the newly constructed improvements, and then we'd lease these constructed units to lower income housing. Community driven, the equity share would can contribute to community owned and directed housing, and we prioritize the construction that results in affordable housing. And that's what's important. So it's like connecting those dots, right? Because we have a lot of homeowners that are sitting on properties with significant equity, but that knowledge gap is that what Cheryl was saying is not there to know that they can maybe participate in how they can do it. So we're here to provide those resources in order for them to be successful in building affordable housing units.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to add on as well, like, can you imagine if you are a Black person who was able to actually go in and buy property and your own property, and you've maybe owned it for 20 years, and a real estate agent comes to you and says, "Oh, I want to buy your property," and they're gonna buy it for $1 million, and maybe you've bought it for $300,000. You're gonna think that that's a huge win, when actually in the long run, it's not, right? Because you're not actually able to take that value and to grow it. But if you're actually able to work with PARTNA, work with a financial expert like Jason, who knows how to take that value of your house, and maybe you can add on some additional housing to the property, make it even more valuable than it is today. Like that's really what we're here to sell to residents, right? This is about financial literacy as well as affordable housing development.
Correct.
Yeah. So this is the PARTNA model. So this is like a summary of the idea that Jason just described. So it's 4 steps. So we're pooling investments from private, charitable, and government sources, and then meeting with homeowners, co-developing a strategy for the development of housing on their property, and then developing new housing on that property. Their property value increases in terms of they're able to generate rent now, and there's affordable housing developed. So both the mission of the homeowner is met while the mission of PARTNA is met in that process. And then the money that is generated is then pooled back into a circular economy of developing more housing. So the goals, there's 4 key goals. So number 1 is to slow social segregation, right? As I mentioned, who's able to access these neighborhoods. In Little Jamaica, for example, I've actually found that the number of Black people have been leaving at an increasing rate compared to other races, right? While other communities are coming in to the neighborhood, and because they have the resources to do so. So how do we actually allow lower income people to stay and also increase the ability to provide new affordable housing in neighborhoods? Number 2 is to build community relationships. So the PARTNA model is really heavily reliant on actually local resident associations in particular. We had a survey circulated for PARTNA, and it turned out about 70 to 80% of the respondents were members of some type of local resident group. And many of the residents also expressed that they have interest in developing a greater relationship with their local neighbors. So the idea of building affordable housing on your property and talking to your neighbor and asking them like, hey, would you be interested in doing the same as well, right? This type of kind of a community land trust kind of approach of having shared ownership over your capacity to actually be part of a solution and not just a bystander. To satisfy the needs and interests of both the existing homeowner and the households to be housed. And then also, of course, to be a model that spurs policy, because we know that developing a solution is just, it doesn't work on its own. We need a whole ecosystem to support it and to also make it competitive, right? Because you'll be seeing later in our slide, one of the challenges that's going to be happening is that, say we're going to be wanting to partner with the homeowner to build affordable housing. If someone else is bidding to partner with them but not build affordable housing, they can offer more, right? But if the city says, we want to be seeing affordable housing in this neighborhood, this makes it a much more even playing field to actually get the outcomes that we're looking for. And so this model isn't anything new. This is actually something that has existed across North America. So we have examples in Los Angeles, Minnesota. We also have in Melbourne. We also have examples here in Toronto as well as in Barrie as well. So we even have very, very local examples. And so we've actually started working on we have a first kind of, oh, Jason?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, sorry, this is your slide.
Oh, that's all right.
I was going on.
It's okay. You're part of it as well, so you know a lot about it. So this is a project that I've acquired with a group of investors, which we've been working with Cheryl, KPMP, and the Keysmac Group, as well as CMHC in the Mission Middle, to kind of present a project in the Little Jamaica area that kind of represents some of the work that we want to be doing going forward. So this is still obviously in works, and there's a lot of work still to be done. But this is an example of more of an assembly type of project. And this is where myself had worked with the homeowner to actually acquire the homeowner's property, but at, essentially at market value, to in turn turn this into the hopes to be about like 53 affordable rental units. So this is kind of where we talk about working with the homeowners and the community to make something happen that exhibits the change, where in most cases, if you had access to this land size in that area, you probably would build maybe 7 townhomes, luxury townhomes. And myself, I looked at it, that's technically in the policy, the best thing to do, and for economic resources would be to build 7 luxury townhomes in there, but it doesn't fit what the needs of the community are. So it's about finding solutions that also benefit the developer, the community, and then the city in general, right? So next slide.
Yeah, so this here is the survey, like a couple summary points from the survey that we had distributed last year and just analyzed most recently. So there are about 88 respondents who expressed great interest in the PARTNA model and who owned a single or semi-detached house that they thought could add density. And some actually about 20+ of those people also owned more than one house that they expressed had this potential. And so that is really, really exciting. I think another thing to note that is really exciting is that out of 131 respondents total, 26% were Black. So we actually have a really high response rate from Black residents. And so those who own single semi-detached houses and were interested, 25% of the houses are owned by someone identifying as Black. I also want to note that 15% of those houses are owned by someone identifying as Indigenous. So these are way above the city's, our proportional representation in the city. And so it's really great to see that level of interest from our communities. And overall, in terms of the respondents, 58% that they're very interested, 35 are interested. And so the areas in the city, so this is a map that shows all respondents, but I want to just call out what areas the city had high respondents from the Black community. So there was a really high turnout of Black respondents from Danforth. And there were responses from other parts of the city as well, but that's one area that really stood out. So really eager to hear more from the folks in Danforth, because there seems to be a little community there for this. Yeah, and also we're really excited to workshop our second pilot. So the second pilot is actually a homeowner who approached me at a community meeting that I was at, and she was saying how, concerned she was about how all these real estate agents kept coming to her and offering to buy her property. And she said she didn't want to sell her property to some, random real estate agent for them to gentrify the neighborhood, right? Because the real estate agent, they're looking to buy so they can flip it into that luxury house. She said she doesn't want to do that. She would rather much sell her house to someone who actually wanted to do something of good for the community. And so now we're working with her to establish what is the vision that where we can meet her needs as well as the strategic goals of PARTNA. And this person lives in the Oakwood Vaughan neighborhood of Little Jamaica. So yeah, Jason.
Yes, so the challenge is that the planning process will be long. Development approvals for this type of housing it takes a while, and it discourages the homeowners from partnering. Um, Cost, obviously, development charges, construction costs increasing due to inflation, the labor force as well as being very tight. And then also, we noticed that also our Black community has been excluded from the construction industry and in union and non-union jobs. And then obviously the difficulty to compete with luxury builders, because for them, when they're building at market prices, they can afford to do these type of projects and continue and make it a going concern. So what we would like to do is partner with individuals to overcome some of these barriers, conduct Black focus engagement with the Black community in Toronto, and then continue to work on the second pilot site, and then also follow up with the respondents and see if we can build relationships with them and to continue to push this idea in the market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that concludes our presentation. Thank you so much. Looking forward to your questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ms. Case and Mr. John. Members, do you have any questions of the presenters or staff on this item? Okay, many questions. Member Yaya?
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you both for this amazing presentation. I think it was really needed, just especially because it emphasizes the importance of home ownership, especially in our community. I do want to ask, however, just cross-referencing your goals with your budget, what the actual statistics are in terms of what you feel can happen within the next few years, especially for our community.
It's going to take obviously a strategic approach. I think there's a couple of ways that we're looking at it as far as raising capital to do this. However, if we work, the great thing is, and it's like a mixed use, right? Because it's great that property values have risen. So it gives you the ability to leverage off that equity to build this type of stuff, these properties in conjunction with homeowners. So it's going to be on us to raise capital from community services and from outside individuals as well. One thing that I'm doing to assist with that is I'm in the process of starting a mutual fund trust that will be able to take investments as little as $1,000 that will support this. So I think it's going to be about leveraging our partners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So in terms of the development stuff, I think in terms of the way that fundraising works, when you have a pilot, it's easier then to generate excitement from the funders to be like, okay, I'm going to throw money behind this now. I can understand what's happening, and so we're focusing on the work of actually reaching out to people, homeowners, and making those connections so that we can then go to the funders and they can understand, okay, this is what we're doing. And it's not to say it's something that would be too complicated, because as I mentioned, it's something that has existed other places, right? But they're just waiting for us to get those pieces together in terms of, okay, this is what the homeowner is wanting, and then we're going to put the money behind it. And so in regards to resources, I wanted to also make note that the labor that it takes to also do that outreach to community members is a really important part in terms of our financial ability. And so really grateful to have one of the supporters of the Confronting Anti-Black Racism unit. So when it comes to doing outreach to the Black community specifically, we're actually a partner with the Confronting Anti-Black Racism unit on that front. And this would be a part of achieving their growing in place strategic plan, which is about helping Black people to not be displaced from their neighborhoods, right? So this could be actually part of that toolkit to achieve that outcome. Thank you for your question.
Great. Member Ajay?
Yes, thank you for this wonderful presentation. This question is just in reference to development in itself. Not too sure how much Black developers are out in our communities, but they are in existence. And I'm wondering if the goal is to partner up with Black developers for these project initiatives. It can also provide an employment opportunity for Black youth in construction as well, like apprenticeships or internships as well, to be a part of this project. Is there any thought in regards to partnering up with Black developers, or are you already doing so?
Yeah, we are already doing so. So for example, Dream Legacy Foundation, we've been in contact with them, and that we kind of have a trajectory of where we see this going. And like, for example, it might even be part of that, the way of delivering on their promise for developing housing for Black Torontonians. Yeah. And we also are talking to other Black developers as well. So we definitely on board with you on that one.
And then myself, I've been working with a lot of Black developers on their projects. So as we're bringing the projects online, the intent is definitely to collaborate with Black developers, and then also contractors too. There's a wide variety of contractors that do various things that we can get them involved. And then it's just about gathering, and that's why that's why the name PARTNA makes sense. We're trying to partner with everybody.
And Member Newton Thompson, I believe I saw your hand earlier.
Yes, you did. Thank you, Co-Chair Justice Betty. And thank you to Cheryl and Jason for this really exciting presentation about PARTNA. Just to say that in the Caribbean, there are various forms of PARTNA. There's Susu in Trinidad and Box in Guyana. And I think the origin of this whole concept is from a West African practice. So, it just sounds very community, and I'm just so glad to hear that you're doing this. I want to ask you how you are spreading the word across Toronto to Black homeowners.
Yeah, so that would be part of our strategic plan. So with support from the Confronting Anti-Black Racism unit, like we have we have scope or we have the ability to have that focus. So in our survey respondents, we have, as I mentioned, 25% of the people who are homeowners are Black, so reaching out to them. And then we have intention to collaborate with, for example, perhaps the Black Health Alliance, right? And other organizations like that who can also help to get the word out to Black homeowners who would be interested in something like this. So I think that's that outreach with Black homeowners is definitely something that we're coming up to doing. Yeah. So if anyone here is would like to support us in doing that outreach, feel free to send me an email. I'll just leave my email in the chat. Because definitely would love to support engaging homeowners in your network, and we can support each other in achieving our common goals there.
Are there any further questions on this matter?
Okay, I just want to say thank you very much for your answer.
Great.
Justice, Co-Chair Betty, just a quick question for the group. I'm just wondering, you've indicated you've met with some external groups. I'm just wondering if you've had a chance to sit with the chief planner.
Sorry, I was just trying to get my email in the chat and I realized it didn't work. I didn't hear your question, Councillor.
Yeah, I was just asking whether or not you and your group have had a chance to sit with the chief planner and his team to explore the idea further. I mean, I see possibilities, but I see a lot of challenges, and I think that it needs to be flushed out further. I mean, I don't want to get into the challenges at this particular point. I'm happy to meet with you folks at some point to have a further discussion, but I see possibilities, but I see huge challenges, and I think that it needs to be explored a little further and fleshed out a little further. So I'm wondering whether or not you've had the opportunity to sit with Greg Lintern and his team to explore the idea, because I think that should be done before you start to extend further into the community to have discussion and to seek out, you know, potential properties. I think that there are huge challenges. And with respect to some of the time delay challenges that you speak about, that actually cost a lot of money, and you talk about the equity situation. I mean, I have questions about that, but I don't want to get into that now. I would really appreciate the opportunity to spend some time to talk with you both a little bit further, as well as to bring some more, I would say, eyes and ears to look at the possibility and to strengthen it. I see that there are opportunities there, but I see some huge challenges with respect to even just the way the Planning Act is written, and just the sort of not in my backyard approach where community folks can actually obviously not support the application. That would create huge challenges. So I wondered whether or not you'd met with the chief planner. If not, again, I'm prepared to sit and chat with you both about some possible ideas. You can reach me on I'm on the internet, and
Yeah,
easy to reach.
I can Google you, Michael. You're there.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I would love that. I really appreciate that offer. So
Okay, great.
I will follow up.
Thank
you.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Wonderful. Are there any speakers to this item? Apatha.
Hi, all my other committee members asked the questions that I was thinking of, but I did want to echo the huge thanks for an amazing presentation. Really, really incredible work, and huge thanks to staff as well for setting this up and bringing them into the meeting. I think I can speak for us all when I say sometimes these meetings can be a little tough with like the topic areas and I think hearing some of the struggles that our community faces. So this is a really hopeful one. Very happy to know about your work, and we'll be following up to see where I can support as well.
Amazing. Thanks, Apatha. Yeah, and also I guess since I can't put my email in the chat, it's my last name my first name @gmail.com, but I'm sure you can also get the email perhaps from the clerks or from the Confronting Anti-Black Racism office as well. Also, I am also available on Google. You can Google me.
Member Phillips, I saw your hand.
Hi, thanks. I'd just like to echo the thanks from Member Adjavan and say this is an excellent presentation, a really excellent idea. I think it will be fabulous if you take Deputy Mayor Thompson's offer up and meet with him to discuss any possible challenges, because I think this does present a really hopeful opportunity, specifically for home ownership for members of the Black community, and for expanding I will call it generational wealth for Black homeowners who already have houses as well, which is something that I think we can't downplay, given the struggles and barriers that people have faced in order to just be able to own a home. So I think I thank you very much. I was not aware of the idea of the missing middle before you all brought that up. And as someone who was originally from Jamaica, I love the idea of the partnership. So it seems very community-based, and congratulate you on your attempts to support the Black community in this way. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that commentary, Member Phillips. Any further speakers?
I just have a quick comment. I just want to thank Cheryl and her other presenter for such wonderful, explaining everything. I like the idea, and I look forward to hopefully work with you. I've known that I've met you before, but just the volume of work you've done thus far, especially for Little Jamaica, I really, really want to tip my hat off to you.
Thank you, Molly.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Yes, Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you. I just wanted to add my voice in terms of supporting the idea with respect to the possibilities and to say, for example, that what we are trying to do is to find solutions that are rooted within the context of the Black community to connect to the larger component part of our city and our society, and to bring ideas forward. It is not simply to extend our hands out, hoping for a hand out. What we're looking for is a hand up, and so holding our hand up in terms of looking for assistance. I think that if we were to look at this in a really, really simplistic way, if we took, for example, let's say 10,000 members of the Toronto Black community who contributed, I don't know, a nominal amount of money. If we looked at about, I don't know, let's say we looked at $100 a month. That's like $1 million, right? A month. That's $1 million. You multiply that and you can get great numbers, right? And you look at a Black-owned trust from the community, and let's assume it's $50. Let's assume it's $75, whatever those multiples are, and so on. And you focus it on a specific objective and goal and target, which is to obviously add to the ideas that are being brought forward by a multitude of folks, city and others, about developing housing and so on. And it isn't about simply saying, well, we have been hard done by, which we have been, but, to continue to talk about that, the question is to what end? The energy focus on that is wasted energy in my view. And I think what we need to look at is more positive approach in terms of what we do. So if you think about going to a restaurant and spending $50 or $100, if you decided to cut that in half, for example, and so if it's half $500,000 a month, I mean, that's a significant sum of money, close to $6 million a year. Well, you multiply that, and then using those funds, like many other groups do, getting loans, line of credits, and so on. And so it's an opportunity for us to be able to do more in context of our own goals and objectives. Building wealth for the Black community is going to take the Black community based on the Black experience to create those opportunities. The idea that we're going to depend on others, whether or not it's repatriation or whatever expectations we seem to think is there for us, it's just not going to happen in the manner that we think. In as much as we have lots of people who exposes all types of linguistic, verbiage about wanting to help the community and so on. If you really look at the history of that, we're still waiting for that help to come. And so we ought not to lose sight of what we are capable of doing. We shouldn't be asking for permission with respect to our intention and our goals and where we want to get to. I think it's collective for the community to realize that we are not to think of ourselves as being lesser as other people think of us as being, because oftentimes we tend to fall into the trap to think the way in which people think about us, and then to think that we are not capable. We know that not to be true. If you look at many instances in our society and so on where Blacks are in position, what are they doing? Well, they're supporting those who are the talking heads, and the talking heads are not necessarily those who are Black. And so what I'm simply saying is this is an approach that we really need to flush it out. We need to make sure that we get the help and assistance, because there are many people that are willing to help the Black community if they see them doing things in interest, their own interest. And in recognizing their own interests and goals and objectives, it speaks to a broader issue where we all benefit at the end of the day. So I think that the time has come, and that's part of the reason why this committee is actually in place to make recommendations to City Council. I'm going to formally propose a recommendation today. This is why I'm suggesting that we meet, because at such time, there are things that we can do. We heard from the staff earlier on around the Kensington Community Land Trust that's been established, that has come from funding like Section 37 and others for capital development and improvement and so on and so forth. There's an opportunity here for us to take some of these ideas and others, because there are many other ideas that we can build on in order to create a future for the next generation of young Blacks that are in need of that foundation to be established, so that we don't have this reoccurring situation that each generation of Blacks are trying to, establish the foundation. Whereas if you look at other groups and other organizations, other people who have come to this country and have successfully established themselves through their own efforts, they have not basically left the foundation to be rebuilt by every new generation. And I think that's part of what we need to achieve. And so we need to collectively work together in a spirited way, focus on goals and objective with a strategy in place, as well as to look at where we can partner with different groups and organizations, as well as the advocacy of those who may not be members of the Black community, who are actually interested in offering their expertise and assistance. But if the Black community leads it, I think that we will achieve the success. If others are left to lead it for us, then in fact we will fail ourselves, and it won't be others failing us, but it's us failing ourselves. So those are just my thoughts on the idea at the moment, and I think that it's worth exploring further. There's a lot of work to be done, and I'm certainly prepared and willing and able to assist wherever I can. So thank you very much, and I wish you well.
Thank you for those words. And, that's kind of my spirit. I think we're at the point now where we can organize ourselves to put our foot forward. And there's a lot we can do. And some of it has a lot to do with just education and spreading the knowledge of what is possible. And, my role in this is to just add that, like what I've learned in the bank and seen and help people use the power of leverage and the power of community to build something special. And I think, we can do it as long as we organize and, and work together, like work with all builders and all, facets and from all communities, even from people who have left the city but have a heart with the city, that have built equity outside of it. So I appreciate those words. And I think it's going to help encourage us to keep moving forward with what we're doing.
Yeah. And if I may add as well, like that piece too about because there is a lot of strength in our community, right? Like there are Black contractors, there are Black people in the finance world, there are Black people in the planning world, right? Like there are Black homeowners. So if we're actually able to collaborate together and make something out of all those assets, right? Like that's what other communities have done as well to get to where they are. And so we can replicate that for ourselves. So instead of having to complain about white organizations not hiring us, if we just build business for ourselves, like that will allow us to be a lot more sustainable and to have our needs met and to move forward. So thank you, Councilor Michael Thompson, for your comments.
Any further speakers on this matter? Yes, final speaker, Member Newton Thompson.
Thank you, Co-Chair Justice Betty. And I want to thank also Deputy Mayor for offering his wholehearted support to this venture. Because I'm no big developer, but I remember about 15 or so years ago when the Congress of Black Women Toronto chapter was building the co-op out in Lakeshore, how much pushback we got, and the NIMBYism came in and all of that. So when you get some support, to get that kind of really high level support is really excellent. Also, I just want to thank you, Jason, for pointing out that you have established the mutual fund trust, because I think that will be also very valuable, for some of us who don't have big funds, but we have enough funds that we can actually try to help to generate the capital that you need. So thanks again.
And just to add to that is like in my world as being a mortgage agent, I always say like I don't know where this customer is going to lead me to a next customer. So sometimes that person that invests $1,000 could lead you to someone that will have millions of dollars that can help advocate your effort. So you know, it's we need to set up things where everyone can put in, that we can attract attention, that we can gather more support. So it's all about community. So I appreciate those comments, appreciate everyone, and just even being able for us to present this here today. It's appreciative, and you know, if I need support and anything, we'll gladly take it so we can push it forward, because we want to see change, right? And we want to be a part of it too.
That is absolutely wonderful. Thank you again. And hearing no further speakers, I have a motion. May I please ask the secretary to display the motion on the screen? Great. I will go ahead then and read the motion, and that is to say that the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee recommend that City Council direct the Chief Planner and Executive Director, City Planning, and the Executive Director of Housing Secretariat to work in collaboration with the Executive Director of Social Development, Finance, and Administration to identify what would be required to support the successful implementation of the PARTNA program and address barriers as they relate to zoning, land use planning, and Black-led affordable housing development, and report back to the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee or the Executive Committee in the first quarter of 2023. All those in favor, please raise your hand.
Justice, before you take the vote, please, could I ask that we add public health to that?
Absolutely. Clerk?
Because we talk a lot about the issue around housing and lack of, and how it affects the health of Blacks and so on. And while we talk about, you know, directors, housing, I think public health would actually offer some insightful assistance and advice to that, because that speaks to really the long-term health and of the Black community.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Deputy Mayor Thompson. Clerk, would you mind redisplaying that motion, and I can reread it with the addition of public health?
Yes, actually, specifically, can we just do the medical officer of health for the City of Toronto? I know public health, but I think if we, you know, incorporate the medical officer of health in Toronto in terms of providing input as part of this process, that would be helpful.
Great.
Okay, co-chairs, if you just give us a moment, we'll make the update and we'll display for your review.
Thank you. Thank you so much, the clerks, for that quick change. So again, this motion says that the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee recommend that City Council direct the Chief Planner and Executive Director, City Planning and the Executive Director, Housing Secretariat to work in collaboration with the Executive Director, Social Development, Finance and Administration, and the Toronto Chief Medical Officer of Health to identify what would be required to support the successful implementation of the PARTNA program and address barriers as they relate to zoning, land use planning, and Black-led affordable housing development, and report back to the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee or the Executive Committee in the first quarter of 2023. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? Okay, this motion carries. Thank you all. And thank you so much again to our incredible presenters, Mr. John and Ms. Case. It was truly wonderful having you here today. The next and last item is item CR 6.3, Commercial Property Ownership Mechanisms in Little Jamaica. We'll be hearing from Romaine Baker, the Acting Executive Director of Black Urbanism TIO, to offer his presentation to our committee. Mr. Baker, I will turn it over to you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Romaine Baker. I'm the Acting Executive Director of Black Urbanism TIO and one of the co-founders of the organization. I'm just going to share my screen briefly. Oops. So today I'll be presenting on the Pathways to Community Ownership initiative. But before we jump into that, I just wanted to provide a brief overview of the organization, our methodology and approach to how we deliver our work in the Little Jamaica area. So our vision is to be a vessel to amplify the soul of Black communities. We are guided by the principles of people, place, and culture, trust, respect, and integrity, partnership, community, unity, and liberation, agency, and power. Black Urbanism TO aims to increase the participation of Black people in community development to advance the collective cultural, economic, and social interests in the neighborhoods we call home. So here we have just a brief timeline from our inception in April 2018 to the launch of the Pathways to Community Ownership project in October 2021. So our approach is to convene. So we convene, we identify, we inform, and we drive change. And so I'll just give a little bit of a breakdown of what each of these mean in action. So for convening, we advocate for or create engagement opportunities to increase the community participation of Black communities in decision making. Some examples of that are in the Housing TO 2020 to 2030 Housing Plan, in which we convene community members in the York Southwestern and Little Jamaica areas to provide input into the city's engagement approach. We launched the Black Business Conversations consultation in February of 2020, in which we engage Black business owners specifically on the barriers to property ownership and the impacts of the LRT construction in the Little Jamaica area. And since then, we've hosted Instagram Live conversations with community leaders, and we've co-hosted a community consultation session with Councillor Josh Matlow. So identify. When we are convening community members, we seek to not only hear about the problems, but to also identify the solutions. And data collection plays a key role in that. Based on the feedback from participants, we're able to identify themes, and through distributing surveys, we're able to identify qualitative and quantitative and qualitative data. So through our analysis, we will distill all that information down to the core systemic barriers. We will identify opportunities and the policy levers to address them, and also identify the roles for the relevant actors, being either community members, political actors, and other stakeholders. And so our aim is to provide evidence-based recommendations. This is just the cover of the Black Business Conversations report. And here we have a sample of the recommendations. So what we heard from Black business owners were around the funding models as used by the city. And so this recommendation is demanding that funding be directly available to local Black businesses when current funding models perpetuate systemic barriers towards ethnocultural businesses. And this is in response to the dynamics of the BIAs, the representation of Black business owners on them, and just the governance structure which prevent and perpetuate systemic barriers. Another recommendation was to develop an economic development and planning framework study for Little Jamaica, recognizing that the impact of the LRT and the years of systemic discrimination against the Black business owners has really provided a unique set of barriers for Black businesses and for the future of Little Jamaica. And so this recommendation here, is what led to the motion that we saw that was passed in October of 2020 for the creation of a cultural district plan and planning framework study. Another recommendation here, which is highlighted, is to identify the barriers and opportunities to property ownership by Black business owners in Little Jamaica, which speaks to this Pathways to Community Ownership project. And the last one here is just speaking about inclusionary zoning policies and how we can broaden the partnership opportunities with the private sector, including nonprofits, housing co-ops, and also looking at community land trusts as a solution to addressing housing need. Inform. So after we've conducted our analysis of the feedback from community and all the data that we've gathered, we will then develop our recommendations and report back to community to validate the things that we've heard. We will publish reports and use it as a policy tool to engage with city officials and other stakeholders, and we build awareness using our social media platforms, using the mainstream media to really amplify the voice of communities and the asks and demands, and also to drive change, which is the next piece to our approach. So this is just, sorry, I'm having just a little bit of lag. So this is just a rendering that was produced by one of our partners, Tira from the Soka architecture firm, which really just visually presented, the vision that the participants in our consultation were sharing with us. This is not to impose a vision on Little Jamaica, but really provides an opportunity for us to re-envision and respond to it. And so the last piece of our approach is about driving change. So we will lead the implementation as Black Communities MTO of specific recommendations, one of them being creating a locally designed economic democracy curriculum, which explores community control and ownership models. We will follow up with relevant political actors to champion the relevant recommendations, which we just have a screenshot here of the motion that was passed in October 2020, which prompted the creation of the master plan for the area. And we will work with, in collaboration with community members to implement recommendations that need to be led by community. And we will direct attention to key priorities and opportunities. So as a part of driving change, Black Urbanism TO works with the master students of the U of T Masters in Planning class to develop this report on placekeeping in Little Jamaica, which looked at supports for Black-owned small businesses and highlighted the impacts of the transit infrastructure projects and transit-oriented development on existing communities, and as well identifies mechanisms that address gaps in ownership. So building on the findings on both of these reports, we're able to approach the Metcalf Foundation with a proposal to engage in this research around establishing a Black-led community land trust in Little Jamaica. So as the name implies, Pathways to Community Ownership, it really explores a variety of models that can be used by the Black community to increase property ownership, whether it be through a formal CLT structure or through group economics, in which private individuals can pool their resources together to pursue a common interest, which is property ownership in the area. So this project will be guided by an advisory committee consisting of business owners in Little Jamaica, as well as experts in the legal and finance and commercial property ownership. So the project is consisting of a number of separate but interrelated parts. One of them being the development of the economic democracy curriculum, which is aimed at building awareness among the business owners of the various community ownership models, as well as ensuring that they understand the pathway to business readiness, so that they will be able to actively pursue these business property ownership opportunities. Another component is research and mapping and analysis of the land assets in the area. And so our methodology will consist of consultation, of course, but focus groups, as well as much larger engagement sessions. But the main piece around the economic democracy curriculum is about getting the businesses to a state of readiness, so that property ownership can be something that can be achievable within the next few years. So what is a community land trust? Community land trusts are community-based, nonprofit, non-governmental organizations that are aimed at securing long-term affordability and community control over land. So these are membership-based, and members are usually within a defined geographic space, and this can consist of folks who live and work in that area. Excuse me. They are also governed by a board of directors that is elected by the members. As it relates to commercial properties, commercial community land trusts refer specifically to the perpetual affordability of commercial ownership and rental opportunities for community-based businesses. And so these models, there are a number of models that are in existence in the United States among Black communities that have really served to address the systemic barriers and provide for ownership of the Black communities that we can learn from. So as it relates to the commercial land trusts, there are two models that we have been exploring. So one is the lease model. So in a lease model, the CLT owns the land and building and leases out the space to a qualifying business tenant. So there are clear criteria that are established that the businesses would have to be able to qualify for. The benefit of this model is that it requires very little upfront investment from tenants. Leases can be tailored to meet the distinct needs of each tenant. The challenge is that the lease model does not ensure equity building for commercial tenants. And so when we're speaking of equity, we're talking about the financial equity, like the appreciation of assets. The next model is the limited shared equity model. So in a limited shared equity model, a qualifying small business owner purchases the building or space at a more affordable price from the CLT. So the CLT owns initially the land that the building sits on, as well as the land. And so they will sell the units within the building or the building itself to a purchaser that qualifies, that meets the criteria. So the building or the space is usually more affordable because the purchase price does not include the cost of the land. So they will then lease the land underneath the building or space from the CLT in the form of a small monthly fee. The benefit of this model is that if and when the owner sells the space, they receive a limited portion of equity from the sale, and they're required to sell to another qualified buyer. This may allow the businesses to have a larger say in the community, which is one of the concerns that we heard repeatedly from Black business owners in Little Jamaica. And this is particularly in regards to the neighborhood business improvement areas. the challenges is that it requires upfront investment from business owners, and even at a reduced cost, the purchase price may not be deeply affordable. Another challenge is that it allows business owners to build equity, but appreciation is not guaranteed in commercial markets. And this is just taking into consideration the market values between residential and commercial property values. But in the city of Toronto, I don't think this is a major issue. So in summary, the main deliverables of this project are, one, to create an economic democracy curriculum that responds to the specific needs of Black business owners in Little Jamaica and the barriers that they face. So it supports future readiness and explores community control and ownership models with the businesses. The other component is conducting a site and property ownership analysis to inventory existing landlords, understand their leaseholds, and identify potential acquisitions for a Black-led CLT in Little Jamaica. And the last component is tied to the Growing in Place initiative, which is led by CABR, in which we will be delivering workshops based on the findings of this research project on leveraging the CLT model for collective economic, housing, and food sovereignty initiatives in Lawrence Heights, Jane and Finch, Little Jamaica, and Mount Dennis. So at this point, we are in the process of establishing the advisory committee, and this project will be delivered over the spring and summer of this year. And this is just our contact information in the event that you would like to get in contact with us. And thank you for having me here today.
Thank you, Mr. Baker, for your presentation. I personally can't see that last slide that you may be referring to, their contact information, if you wanted just to try to redisplay it for the members' benefit.
Can you see it now?
No, we cannot see it at this time, but I believe it was previously circulated as well. So members should have access to it in their emails as part of the items for this meeting. That being said, oh, perfect. Thank you so much, Mr. Baker.
No problem.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing. And while you leave that up, I will ask as well if the members have any questions of the presenters or staff on this item.
I have two short questions. Thanks again, Romaine, for this lovely presentation. Just out of curiosity, do you know if there's any Black businesses on the executive management of the BIA in Eglinton? Are you aware?
Of any Black businesses?
Yes, on
yes.
the executive, not a part, but on the executive team. The executive, like, you know, how they have the BIA and they have those that are executive that help to make the decisions.
So with the BIAs, they have the board, which is composed of, you know, business owners as well as property owners. And so on the there are 3 BIAs that cover Little Jamaica. And so there is one Black business owner on the Eglinton Hill BIA, which is covering the area by Eglinton and Keele. And there is, again, 2 Black business owners on the York Eglinton BIA board.
Okay. And I know the findings, but were like from this, like, I don't know, were there any surveys that you've conducted that, you know, highlight some of the barriers? And I don't know if you could share some of those barriers to Black businesses ownership to commercial property in Little Jamaica. I don't know if you can share some of that with us from your conversation with them.
So when we're doing the Black Business Conversations report, a part of that project was to do like a fulsome survey of the Black business owners. COVID interrupted that, and so this time around will be when we will have those more in-depth conversations around the specific barriers that Black business owners face. What we have heard in our conversations with individuals is around you know, them doing as much as they can to have their, you know, their taxes, you know, filed and their businesses composed in according to best practices. But when they do approach, the banks, for example, that they aren't be able to qualify for loans, not only for property ownership, but just to invest in their business. That they might not have a financial advisor, for one. But we are, through this project, going to be exploring more deeply what those barriers are, so that the economic democracy curriculum can respond effectively to those.
Thank you, Mr. Baker, for your response. Member, was there another follow-up question? Sorry.
Sorry, I do not have any further questions. Thanks again.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Member Phillips?
Hi, Mr. Baker. Thank you so much for that fabulous presentation. It really does present some good opportunities going forward. I like the idea specifically of the commercial community land trusts. And I have two questions, one specific to Little Jamaica and one specific to Black communities or Black businesses or business owners in general. And the first question is around how you plan to go forward to decide what is the best of the two opportunities that you presented, the lease opportunity or the own opportunity in terms of the commercial community land trusts, with the input of Black business owners. How will you decide which of those is the best option? Is it possible to have something that incorporates both of those options? And is it possible to have something that incorporates a transition from, for example, lease to own option, or a lease with the option to own? I understand I might be jumbling up things that aren't that you can't do, but I wonder if that's a possibility. So that's question number one, and I'll put question number two, which is more specific to Black businesses in general. Is there any consideration for how you will go from this specific opportunity related to Black businesses in Little Jamaica to increasing opportunities for property ownership for Black business owners in general across the city of Toronto, who may or may not be in Black specific neighborhoods?
Okay, thank you for those questions. I'll answer the latter question first. So community land trusts are, community-driven initiatives that require a constituency of members to, compose this organization. So if the community land trust is a model that is being pursued by a community that is outside of an area like Little Jamaica, it would look a bit different, and the purpose for which or the target individuals for which affordability is being provided would also be impacted. And so there needs to be a critical mass or community that would compose the CLT, and also that will be served by it. So in our case, we're looking specifically at Black business owners, because we recognize that Little Jamaica is especially at the present time, primarily a commercial district. And so Little Jamaica, the culture and the brand and the amenities that it provides are really tied to the presence of the businesses. And so there is an imperative to ensure that the businesses are not displaced. In other communities where it could be like residential or looking for affordable commercial spaces that could also be accessed by not-for-profits and whatever have you. there would still need to be a community there to support it. And that's not saying that it needs to be, composed exclusively of Black members, but it would just need to have a clear criteria on exactly who would be served by the land trust and who the members are. As it relates to the first question about choosing between lease or own, that is a good question. I don't think we've crossed that bridge yet, but it will definitely be directed by what we hear from the business owners, and in broader community as well, on what the core objectives are. Is it to provide affordable spaces that um, in the grand scheme of things will allow businesses to come and go that continue to support and perpetuate the presence of this Afro-Caribbean business district in the city? Or is it for folks to be able to have, I guess, longevity and to be able to have equity when they are trying to sell and have assets that they could possibly pass on to their later generations? So I think depending on what we hear from community, it will definitely define the path forward. And as you mentioned, there might be an opportunity where we are able to employ both models in the structure, depending on the circumstances of the individual tenants that will be looking to occupy the space.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And Member Newton-Thompson, I believe I saw your hand as well.
Thank you, Co-Chair Justice Betty. Mr. Baker, thank you for the presentation, and it's always good to see different activities, positive activities occurring in our community to try and uplift us as a community. I noticed that in your presentation you talked about focusing on some communities, some areas where there's larger Black population. So it looks like it's Finch to the north and Eglinton, perhaps Sinclair to the south, and then Jane and Allen Road, west and east. And I'm wondering if you are considering expanding to places like Rexdale, where there's a significant Black community. And in all of the presentations today, I didn't hear any mention at all of Rexdale. And I'm not dumping that on you, but I'm just wondering if you are considering adding more communities where there are large percentages of Black residents.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. So those communities that were named in the presentation, those were specifically communities that are actively being supported through the Confronting Anti-Black Racism's Growing in Place initiative. So we will be delivering the workshops in these communities, but specifically, but that isn't to say that we can't support other communities elsewhere. To date, we haven't engaged community members up in Rexdale, so it would definitely be an opportunity to explore, but also to be able to respond to community members there. Like, I think we would need community members to actively be pursuing that type of support. Also, Little Jamaica is we're kind of working against the clock in this community, and so there's an urgency here that isn't really present in other communities, aside from the ones that we have named in the presentation. That I think in terms of capacity, we would definitely need to be able to test different approaches here, learn what works and what doesn't, and get it right before engaging other communities, so that we have an approach that is tried and true and tested, and that can deliver on the interests of Black communities.
Thank you,
Thank you for your answer.
You're welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Baker. Yes, Deputy Mayor Thompson.
Thank you, Co-Chair Betty, and through you to Mr. Baker. Mr. Baker, can you tell us how many Black-owned businesses are in Little Jamaica?
So at the time when we were doing our surveying in December 2019, there were about 90 businesses on Eglinton from Kiel to Morley. That does not include businesses going south on Oakwood to Vaughan, which are also included in the Little Jamaica area. We haven't done our tally since then, but we will be doing so this spring.
So what was that number? What was that number? You said 90 businesses. Were they 90 Black businesses, or there were 90 businesses in general? 90 Black businesses.
businesses.
Okay,
yes.
Great. Thank you very much for that. And how many of the buildings that are located in Little Jamaica are actually owned by Blacks? Do you know that information?
We don't know for sure.
Okay, so you're trying to fix a problem that you're trying to, you just don't know that information? Are you trying to get that information?
Yes. So when we do our surveys this year, we will be determining how many of them own the properties that they're operating out of.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you. And can you tell us how the Heritage Conservation District will benefit Black-owned businesses in this area?
Sure. Thank you for that question. So the Heritage Conservation District, as far as we understand, will not stand on its own. It is another layer on top of the planning framework and this, this grander and the cultural district. So there are, buildings in the area that have served as recording studios, as venues for different business operations that have stories attached to them. And so the benefits can really be realized through the storytelling component of bringing to life the past of these buildings, and the usage that they once or continue to be used for. And so on its own, the heritage, cultural heritage designation, I don't believe provides economic benefit unless it is being used actively as a part of a grander, storytelling or tourism approach where folks are coming in specifically to learn about the history of the building and of the area. What the cultural heritage designation does is it provides some protection against development, right? So that the building will stay in its present form or in a modified form. So as development happens, there are various features of the physical structure that can be retained. But I'm not sure if that's the objective that business owners are necessarily looking for. But as a part of a grander plan for the area, the cultural heritage designation would provide the benefit of ensuring that stories can be told, people can come to learn about, and that will definitely be dependent on property owners. And I guess we can definitely support as broader community, but ensuring that the space can be activated in a way that that brings it to life.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you can actually have a heritage cultural district and in fact not actually have a community that's actually have, in case of Little Jamaica, that actually has many Black-owned businesses. Is that correct?
So you're saying we can have a cultural heritage district without Black-owned businesses?
No, this is what I'm hearing from you. I'm asking you if that's what I'm hearing from you.
Absolutely.
You've indicated, right. So, and the reason why I ask you the question, and thank you for your answer, because I've heard many conversations from folks in the area, and there seemed to be a disconnect with respect to the benefits of the HCD in terms of how it would actually help Little Jamaica, because you could have the HCD and actually have no Black-owned businesses there, but you actually have the history but no presence to really speak to economic prosperity. And I just wanted to ensure that there was no confusion about that, because there was some time ago, there was this great deal of sort of concern about not having it, and whether or not it was something that was going to help the community. And I would submit to you that whether or not it's there or not, quite frankly, it's mutually exclusive of whether or not there is a program to help the community to succeed. And so my question then to you, and I guess you've sort of spoken about it a little bit in terms of helping with respect to the education, economic education, helping with respect to programs around, helping Black-owned businesses understand how to deal with banks, how to deal with cash flows, how to deal with all those standard things so that they can survive. So that's your focus then in terms of the overall, but the HDC is an element, but it isn't central to the success or the failure of Little Jamaica. Would I be correct in terms of that assessment?
Absolutely. I agree with that assessment.
Okay, thank you very much for that, because that's helped with respect to the clarity. Thank you, Madam Chair. Those are all my questions, and thank you very much.
And I would just like to add that, yes, there has been a bit of confusion around, the merits of a heritage conservation district as opposed to a cultural district, which is something that is being going forward, and how
it's going to be a signature item, I think, if you as you fully turn. Madam Chair, just one further question that just has come up as a result of the conversation here. Mr. Baker, can you tell us about the working relationship with respect to the program that our team from EDC is actually engaging in with the BBPA, and your relationship and the working relationship with your group and the BPA? How is that going? Are you working with them? Is that something that's helpful?
We have met with the BBPA, and we, have cordial relationships. But I can't say that we work necessarily together. I think in the early stages of the Mayor's Roundtable in 2019, there was definitely a quorum, so to speak, of different stakeholders in the community, of which the BBPA and ourselves were a part of. And there was coordination in efforts and knowledge sharing, and much more open conversations. At the present time, we don't have a forum like that, and so I think it's because of the absence of a dedicated forum why we haven't been coordinating and working as collaboratively together.
So am I hearing you correctly, sir, that you're suggesting that there's a need for a forum in order to ensure or facilitate the working relationship with the Black Professional Association? I mean, I'm just wondering, isn't there a synergy that can be found in terms of the research, the work that you're doing, and the underground work that they're actually doing? I'm just wondering, is there not a way for that to be facilitated? Because you talk about the urgency in terms of responding to Little Jamaica. I'm just wondering if there isn't a mechanism that can be found absent of the Mayor's Roundtable and so on. I mean, people talking to people simply picking up the phone or going on a Zoom call and having a conversation about the interest, the purpose. Because I mean, it's not about your group's interest or the BBPA's interest, but it is about the interest of Little Jamaica. I'm just wondering if there isn't a way for you to, and the BPA to facilitate. I'm not sort of putting it all on you, quite frankly. I'm just wondering if there isn't a way that this could be facilitated in order to expedite, as you've explained to this group, that there's a sense of urgency. I'm just wondering if there isn't a mechanism.
Absolutely. And a few weeks ago, there was a community group that had convened community members, and there was definitely an appetite and a hunger of, Black community members, youth in particular, to be engaged and to be involved. And so coming out of that, one of the things that were identified is the need for, more frequent meetings like the one that was held. And so there is definitely opportunity and desire to work collaboratively with all the stakeholders in the neighborhood. working on the ground, and those who are engaging with policy and with other levels of government is definitely something that we are keen to do. And so, yeah, we don't necessarily need a forum like the mayor's table, roundtable, that is, facilitated by the city. So we're definitely open to pursuing that.
Can I then ask you what action you will take at the end of this meeting in order to engage that process?
Well, I also think that it's dependent on capacity and resources. As far as I'm concerned, the BBPA is being funded as an organization to provide services and support to the Little Jamaica community.
Right.
They have funding that we don't have. And so if there's anyone who the onus should fall on to galvanize support and to gather community, it should be the BBPA, not Black Urbanism TO, which is a volunteer-based organization.
Right, right. So if would you be interested in if I arrange an opportunity for discussion with your group and the BBPA, would that be of interest to you, sir?
Absolutely.
Okay.
But it's about who is being funded to do the work.
Well,
And
let's do this. Let's have a conversation about what needs to be done, and then we'll worry about the details about money later, right? Because let's identify the challenges and the problems, because oftentimes we tend to focus on the funding and not enough attention to the actual work and the agreed upon work, right? So wonder if we could do that. I mean, we can discuss those other details a little bit later on. So, but if you're amenable to that discussion, I would be pleased to, and I'd like to maybe invite Co-Chair Betty to be part of that as well. And we will bring some other folks to the table to have a conversation and to see where the linkages and the synergies are, because at the end of the day, I think our success is going to depend on you, the BBPA and others and so on. And the facilitation of that will come through a medium of discussion and dialogue, and then to determine what resources will be needed in order to accelerate and in order to get to the place where you wanted to. Because I think that there's great talent on both groups. It's a question of obviously how we kind of facilitate and sort of marshal on an effort, if you will, in order to to complete the task at hand, which is, I think, everybody's interest to ensure that we save Little Jamaica. I guess that's what your objective is. I think that's what our objective is with respect to the assignment that's been assigned to the BBPA. So I look forward to that discussion. And thank you very much for your presentation today, sir. Justice, back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Co-Chair. Any further questions for Mr. Baker? Okay. And if there are no further questions, are there any speakers to this item? If you wish to speak, please raise your hand or go ahead and unmute your mic. Okay, no speakers today for this item. All right, then hearing no further speakers, I have a motion. May I please ask the Secretary to display the motion on the screen? Thank you. Okay. So this motion reads that the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee recommend that City Council direct the Executive Director, Social Development, Finance and Administration, and the General Manager, Economic Development and Culture, in consultation with the Executive Director, Corporate Real Estate Management, the Executive Director, Housing Secretariat, other appropriate city divisions, and the Chief Executive Officer, create TO, to explore using community land trusts to support the economic and social well-being of Black communities, including commercial, housing, and food land trusts to support Black businesses and community organizations in Toronto neighborhoods with a population made up of at least 10 to 15% Black residents. Is there any feedback on this motion before I proceed?
Madam Chair, I wondered whether or not we could add a B to that, which would be that Black Urbanism and the BBPA be requested to meet with the co-chairs and members of economic development staff in order to discuss how the BBPA and Black Urbanism could potentially work together to accelerate the work plan for Little Jamaica. I hope staff has gotten that. It's just vis-a-vis the discussion we've just had with Mr. Baker, and just as part of this, I think it would be best that we actually put that in motion.
Duly noted. Was that received by the clerks?
So co-chairs, we will need a moment to type that up. I'm sorry, can you spell out the acronym, the BBPA, what that stands for?
Sure. The Black Business and Professional Association. I apologize to the clerk. I had not intended to move that as a motion, but I just thought that perhaps it would be wise for this group in order to sanction that meeting and conversation. So that's why I've just thought of it now. So my apologies that I had not written it in way of sending you an email.
No problem. Would you like to send a quick email now, or would you?
No, just go ahead and do it. And if you need, I'll draft you one after.
Okay. Would you mind sort of repeating that thought? So
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
The committee is requesting the chair and co-chair
to meet with Black Urbanism, the Black Business and Professional Association, along with representatives from Economic Development, to discuss how both groups could work together in the interest of accelerating the plan, the work plan for Little Jamaica. We'll just leave it as a work plan because it's a work in progress, right? So it's a work plan.
Okay. Okay, just give us a minute, please.
Sure, that's fine.
And in the meantime, I saw Member Newton-Thompson's hand was raised as well.
Just to make a friendly amendment to change the word recommend to recommends. Just put an S on recommend.
Thank you, Member Newton-Thompson. I'll refer that to the clerks.
Yeah, so Member Thompson, with apologies, the action is that the committee recommend that.
Let's instead of using the term recommend, request. Let's request. Okay. And may I also ask you to put a timeline on it, please? I think that this meeting should take place before or by the end of, I would say, hopefully the latest early May. So I would say if you could find a date there. I'm just quickly look at dates. Excuse me for a second. Mr. Baker, do you have a specific date in mind? I think it would be ideal if we got this meeting in place. It's the 1st of April today, and perhaps we should be able to get this in before the end of the month. What do you think, sir?
Yes, absolutely. I think.
Okay. Just let me just quickly look at some timing here quickly and see. Just looking potentially, I would hope that we could get this in by either the. Just looking through just my own schedule here, sir. If we could do it by the. I would say the 29th. Oh, well, actually, we have another meeting. So how about I'm just looking here quickly through April. April is just so crazy busy. I would suggest that we try to get something on or about the, just looking at, how about the 14th of April, if that's possible. That's one potential date. Would that work for you? And just does that date work for you?
Just give me a second to check my
Sure,
calendar.
thank you. We're trying to get dates on the fly, I know.
Yes, April 14th may work for me, subject to, of course, the exact timing. But
yeah, so it could be simply a WebEx or a Zoom call, right? So
yes, of course.
Let me just flip back up to April 14th here, and we could possibly do that in the morning. Possibly, actually, sorry, I'm just looking on here. How about we do that in the afternoon around 3 o'clock? Could that work? Or 4?
April 14th at 3 o'clock works for me.
Fantastic. So we'll put the date and time in so that we can actually have that in place. Thank you very much. Thank you, clerks.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Was there any further feedback from the committee on the motion before I go ahead and reread it? And as soon as the clerks have it ready, I will happily read the motion and we can go ahead and vote on it.
Co-chair, I will now display the motion.
Wonderful. Thank you, Claire. Great. Thank you so much again. So the revised motion now reads that the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee recommend that City Council direct the Executive Director, Social Development, Finance and Administration, and the General Manager, Economic Development and Culture, in consultation with the Executive Director, Corporate Real Estate Management, the Executive Director, Housing Secretariat, and other appropriate city divisions, and the Chief Executive Officer of Create TO, to explore using community land trusts to support the economic and social well-being of Black communities, including commercial housing and food land trusts to support Black businesses and community organizations in Toronto neighborhoods with a population made up of at least 10 to 15% Black residents. Further, requests that the chair and the co-chair Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee to meet with representatives from Black Urbanism TO and the Black Business and Professional Association, along with staff from the Economic Development and Culture, to discuss opportunities for working together in the interest of accelerating the work plan for Little Jamaica on April 14th, 2022. Okay.
Sorry,
And
Madam Chair. Madam Chair,
yes.
I didn't see April 14th in the motion.
Yes. Clerks, would it be possible to add April 14th, 2022 to the written motion, please?
And or perhaps one of the things that clerks may do is to that the meeting be held perhaps before the end of April. So just in case there's any adjustment that's needed, perhaps that would be better as opposed to the specific date. We can agree on the date, but just in case there are some challenges.
Yes, our advice would be to keep the date somewhat flexible in that there are implications for staff in the motion. So if you prefer to include a date range.
Yeah, I think that would be better. That the meeting to be convened no later than the end of April.
Okay, just give us 1 second.
Yep, thank you.
Just to say again that the verbs should be recommends and requests. They should have S's on them.
Thank you, Member Newton-Thompson, for the feedback on the written motion.
Can I get the clerk's comment on that, please, whether or not it makes a difference with respect to the motion?
So, Chair, the standard motion is to not have the S on the end because the stem phrase is that. So the committee is requesting that, that the committee recommend or that the committee, and it's a conditional. So if you look across our city motions, that wording is fairly consistent.
Yeah, so there's no need for an S on the end, Madam Chair.
Thank you for the explanation.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so Chair and Co-Chair, we've just added the time frame to the end there.
Wonderful. For the third and final time, I'll go ahead and reread that if that's necessary, or could I go ahead and look to move that motion, clerks?
I think we should consider it read.
Thank you so much, Co-Chair. Alrighty then, so all those in favor, please raise your hand. Great, any opposed? Okay, this motion carries. All right, members, I would like to move a motion to excuse the absence of members who are not in attendance for today's meeting. May the clerk staff please display the motion on the screen. Okay. That the Confronting Anti-Black Racism Advisory Committee excuse the absence of Beverly Jane Daniel, Adam Lake, and Justine Namara from the April 1st, 2022 meeting of the committee. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Any opposed? This motion carries. Okay, that concludes our business for today. Actually, just one moment. Clerks, do we have any items that require a closed session?
Co-chair, we don't have anything.
Okay, thank you so much. So that concludes our business for today. Thank you, members, staff, and presenters. This meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you for a great meeting. Really
Thank
great
you,
content
everyone.
today.
Thank you. And
Thank
to all
you.
the presenters, if they're still on the line, it was
Yes, thanks
fantastic.
to all the amazing presenters. I agree with you. Bye, everyone. Have a great weekend.
You as well.
Thank you. Okay.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.